Well, here I am. Good morning, everyone. Uh, where's my music player? I need to turn that down. It's kind of a little too chill for this morning, I think. Some nice ambient sounds. So, good day to you all. Hello, thanks for watching. Thanks for being out there. This is a live stream for my electronic literature class, section 1, and today we're going to be talking about kinetic poetry. Thanks for saying hello in the chat. I can see you all saying hi and appearing above me, but feel free to use the Twitch chat if you'd like. Whichever is easiest for you is fine with me, but I do appreciate if you're a student, knowing that you're out there so that I can see who's watching, and it looks like quite a few of you, so good morning. Good morning, everyone. So today is Monday of week 12 of the semester, and we're going to be talking about kinetic poetry this week and somewhat next week, probably. So today I have a lot of examples basically to show you. It's not as much of a lecture as it is a series of demos, so it'll be a little bit, we'll see how it goes. In some cases, I'm not totally sure what's going to work the best as far as putting it out across the stream, but I'll do my best, and hopefully some things will be interesting and make some sense. And one of the interesting things, of course, is that it's kind of, when the topic is kinetic poetry, even concrete poetry, the point of that poetic form is that the shape it takes has meaning, structure equals meaning. It's kind of hard to get that when you're just describing it instead of showing it or watching it, whichever modality makes sense. So it's kind of tricky to write a chapter in a book about kinetic poetry. I wanted to, as much as possible, illuminate some of those with the examples if I've been able to find them or if I know of them, and a couple other things that I wanted to mention because I think they're relevant and I think enhance what we're learning about here. Okay, so let me I just have a couple of slides. I don't have a whole thing. I just it might be interesting to show just to remind you all a couple of things. So I don't know. I guess I could share this slideshow, but it's not really worth sharing, honestly. So here's where we are. I had much more elaborate plans for today, but anyway, it is what it is. I don't know if you can hear, by the way, but there's some I'm getting some work done on my fence, and so they're out there hammering. You might hear some of that punctuating what I'm talking about, just sort of adding to the sound poetry of it today. Okay, so a couple reminders, 3 reminders actually. So the 3rd Gen project is due on Wednesday. So I know many of you are done already, or you've shared your idea with me, and that's great to see. So I appreciate seeing those. If you still have questions about it, or if you still are trying to figure out your idea, you definitely still can. It's not due till Wednesday, so if you're still working on it a little bit. And actually Amber has a good question in the chat here that relates to my little bullet point reminder here. It's the idea that I want you to find some kind of scholarly source about your work. So in other words, if you remember for the 3rd Gen project, you're creating something new, but it is in some way depending on or remixing or creating a sequel of or critiquing or parodying or whatever, some original work, some older work. And so I want you in your artist statement to talk about at least one critical scholarly academic source that talks about that earlier work that your work is also commenting on. It's kind of hard to explain in those kind of placeholder ways, but like Amber's writing about House of Dust, or her work was based on House of Dust, and so her job is to find some kind of critical scholarly work about House of Dust. So Amber's question here is, she didn't find that many works that discussed House of Dust, but wanted to use something besides the class reading. And that's true. I do want you to use something besides the class readings, mainly because I think the one that you'll most likely look at as sort of occupying most of your ideas about what this class is about is the book Electronic Literature by Scott Rutberg. And it is a textbook. I would say it's written by a scholar, but I don't know if it's a scholarly critical work on its own. Maybe in some parts of it uses that, but it's more of a survey. It's more of a textbook saying, here's some stuff you should know about. So I really want you to go beyond that if possible. And if you're not sure where to find things like this, right, ElmSip is really the starting point. Google Scholar is great too, but let's just take a look. And Amber, if you found the item that you were talking about here, let me know which one it is, and I can maybe give you some more specific feedback. But like here's electronic literature. This is our textbook. But there's these other things here that are perhaps a bit more, a bit more critical or demonstrate a more specific point of view. And this is an example of that. So the URL is always kind of hard to find on some of these, but oh no, really? Okay, so this is odd. Hang on, I have this in my hang on a second. I'm going to find this article because I was citing this article in something I'm writing. Where is it? Do I not have Zotero installed? Oh man, I'm so far behind. But anyway, Amber, if you let me know what your source was, I might be able to just tell you if it's, you know, give you a quick take on it. It's probably fine. It's probably something good. I'm more interested in the sort of reaching out and finding new things than I am like the inherent qualities of the thing itself, if that makes sense. Ultimately, I mean, I think there are a lot of good, really strong things out there that are good. So I do want you to find those, but it's more about finding what else is out there. This is Aquilina. I'm pretty sure I have this, but maybe my link is wrong too. Let's see. Looks like the same one. Huh. Weird. Okay, so here it is. Why is this? Oh, weird. They have a new URL for this. That's kind of weird, but okay, fine. I'll update this in my Zotero library. But this is a scholarly work that talks about House of Dust, Amber, in case you want to look at this one. But if you've already got something, I don't know. It's probably not necessary to find something new. It's best if you can tell me which one it is. But this is the one. Like, this is the article that should be referenced from here. I wonder if there's a way we could correct this reference. I mean, I know there is, but I don't know if there's a way that we're supposed to be able to submit these things. I wonder, you know, come to think of it, this might be a reference to a conference paper that then was published also as an article, so maybe that's why there's a confusion with the link structure. I don't know. Okay, I see Amber typing, so I'm going to hopefully, I don't want to move on to the next topic until we look at this one, but yeah, it's something new. So ElmSip, like I said, in general, is a great place to find things. But the other thing, too, that you should note is, and I mentioned this last night in Discord, answering Connor's question, but if you're looking for something about, let's say, House of Dust, you don't have to find something that is an article about House of Dust. Like, it can be some article that you think helps you understand House of Dust better. And so that could be something about Taroko Gorge, or it could be something about something else entirely. But as long as you're able to make a connection between those two, then that's what it is. And some of these works will be pretty obscure, and so, you know, you may not find a whole lot of scholarly literature about it. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, and so Amber's mentioning using the UMW library search. That is also a good place to look, right? I would also recommend two more. I can recommend two more places. Google Scholar is also great for a lot of things, right? I mean, you probably know this. I hope you know this. Google Scholar is good. You have to kind of filter the results a little bit. You have to think about what you're actually looking at, and some of these things actually aren't about the same thing, but these are pretty good. Another one that I have not spent a lot of time with yet, but that seems pretty good, is archive.org, good old archive.org. They have this nice thing, scholar.archive.org, and I don't know, let's see what they got about House of Dust. Okay. Looks like quite a few things that are possibly relevant. Okay, damn magazine. I don't know this. I don't know this magazine. But yeah, okay. So this looks all right. I mean, this looks like a description of it, which is good to have this. But I think you could probably find something else that's more, unless there's more to this that I'm not seeing at a glance. I think you could probably find something that's actually more like analytical that would be helpful, because this is more, right, this is just saying that this is an exhibition that's going to be running, I guess, although, is it running contemporarily? It says about a contemporary installation of it? Oh, maybe the fall semester, which fall? 2016? Reactivations. Yeah, I think you can find something else. I mean, I just found quite a few right now. I think you will find it interesting, especially in thinking about like the context for your work on Instagram versus the context for this original work in museums and other kind of places. I think those are pretty different things. So I don't know. I mean, I think this is okay, but I think there's probably more out there. So it's up to you if you want to find something else. I will say that. But yeah, if you have any other if anyone else has questions about like particular works or things, I'd be happy to comment on those right now. But the idea basically is see what you can find, and there's a lot. I mean, it's just sort of knowing where to look and kind of what kinds of things are valid. The Electronic Book Review, by the way, this is kind of the main journal for people studying electronic literature. There's a couple more. There's Digital Humanities Quarterly is also pretty good. They cover a lot of things, but also including they have some things about electronic literature. There's also Hyperrise. I always forget how to spell that. Hyperrise? I think that's it. No, not .com anyway. Hyperrise. There it is. .io. Is that new? I wonder if they used to be .com. Anyway, there it is. So this is another journal that's focused on electronic literature. So check this out too if you're looking for things, right? And these should be indexed. I mean, the articles in here should be indexed in places like Google Scholar, but also they may not be. So these are things that might be helpful to find. All right, so let me just add these links in the Discord chat. Some more places to look for scholarly things. So there's Hyperrise, then there's oh man, wrong tab. Hang on. digitalhumanities.org/DHQ. So for example, this had that article that I mentioned a while ago with Dennis Dirge taking a look at the original Colossal Cave. So here's DHQ, and then there's EBR. So these are specific places, but again, you can also look at things like scholar.google.com and scholar.archive.org. There we go. Okay, that's enough typing for now. All right, Vince is looking good. All right, this guys are working on it out there. Okay, so oh great. Oh, sorry. This is new. Okay, I just saw this. These are both really good. These are both two articles about the kind of thing I'm working on right now by two people who I am working with and citing frequently on this. So I know this. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting interested in this. I know this Leah Henriksen's work is really good. She looks a lot at how people read computer-generated text, which is pretty cool. So, anyway, so Nick Modford, who's come up a few times, he just published a new book. I think I mentioned this, but he just published a new computer-generated book, and he invited me to write a afterword for it. So that got published recently with my contribution. That was pretty cool. Fun. Okay, so I'll look into these things later. So anyway, let's talk about Kinetic and digital poetry and a few things here. Oh yeah, another thing. Sorry, all these things. The 3G project's due Wednesday. The final project proposal is due Friday, and I've updated this list of possible names. So here's a link to the very massive list by Dina Grigar and I think some other people. If you look through it, I think there are quite a few more even than what are listed down at the bottom. So these are it's 200 or so names down here, and then there's quite a few others that are mentioned in the talks. So I don't know if they're all added to that list at the bottom yet, but that I know that someone was working on that. But this is a very long list, and some of these women have articles already, some of them don't, and I just kind of went through. Don't treat this as like a definitive list, but these are women, as I was looking through it, that I was like, either I was surprised they didn't have a Wikipedia page, or I think I can see how it would be pretty easy to make one in the sense that there are references to them on other Wikipedia pages, or just people who, in some cases this is just people whose work I look at a lot, so I'm surprised there's no Wikipedia article for them. So anyway, these are it's a slightly shorter list, and it's not meant to be like these are the best necessarily, but these are, I think, all available. So that's something you could use to guide your choice if you're thinking about this option for the final. Again, just kind of suggest 2 or 3, and I would say just search for some of these people on Wikipedia, search for them on the web, and see if you think you have enough there to make a reasonable Wikipedia article. In a couple cases, some of these women have names that are shared by other people that have the same name, and so some of that's sometimes you have to still filter through that a little bit, but most of them don't. And in a couple cases, like they just need a little bit of cleanup. So in some cases, like if you're wanted to work on like Dina Larson's page, maybe I would want you to also work on someone else's too, just to kind of give you a bit more work to do, because Dina Larson's page, I don't know if it needs that much work. It's been flagged as needing work, and so that's why I gave it the asterisk there. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I really hope some of you choose this option. I think it's pretty exciting. I think to me it's fun. It's a fun alternative, or it's fun for me to think about anyway, because it's a different kind of work, and I think a really valuable kind of work. I mean, essays are great, but ultimately, like, you and I are probably the only two people that are ever going to read that, unless you go to the Writing Center or something, or you publish it on your blog or something. But the Wikipedia article can have the potential to be read by thousands of people, so I think that's really cool. And also, it would be something that could contribute to helping enrich the scholarly conversations around the field. So, again, I really hope some of you choose that option. But if you already have an idea for something else, that's fine too. All right, so week 12, so cohorts are in person. All right, that's where we are. All right, great. So finally getting to some examples and some things. I hope I have enough time to show you several of these, so I'm kind of moving into this phase of it. But if you have questions about either the projects or anything, of course, let me know. Might be easier to talk about these things in person on Wednesday, but if you have a question before then, of course, reach out. I will be somewhat unavailable tomorrow, I should say that, but if you see me online, then you can probably just start a message in Discord, and I'll probably respond pretty soon. But I'm going to be mostly helping out with some stuff on tomorrow with my family, so I will probably not be online as much as I usually am on a Tuesday. Okay, so just to very, very general kind of working our way into this, right? So Chris Funkhauser, whose work we read his analysis of the IBM poetry, his explanation of that method. He's written a couple books about digital poetry, and he's a real historian of the form. He has come up with, I think, a nice three-part explanation of digital poetry, and the third part of that, I think, really is where kinetic and interactive poetry comes in. So he talks about digital poetry is that which relies on composition, it relies on a computer for composition, generation, or presentation. And in this case, presentation is what we're mostly interested in when we talk about kinetic poetry. And that idea about presentation is what connects contemporary digitally based kinetic poetry with its predecessors in print. And there are quite a few of these. And if we think about the aesthetic and ideological ideas in those movements, earlier movements of poetics that relied on presentation, then I think we can start to form some ideas about kind of where kinetic poetry lives today on the web, maybe. But if nothing else, we can understand them as prior art that people working in computers are aware of and riffing on or referencing, or trying to are inspired by in different ways. So basically, just there is a heritage before computers, but the computer part is, of course, what we're interested in now. So, okay. Those guys are all right. Okay, so it's kind of noisy. So anyway, so this is a very early example. This is Easter Wings by George Herbert, and as you can see, this is a really low quality image, but it's interesting that it's laid out in a couple. It's laid out sideways. It's laid out in two recto verso pages here, and it's written in such a way that in order to read it, you would have to either turn your head like this or rotate the page in order to read it down this way. If you look for it, like if you Googled it, I was interested to see that there are a couple different ways of representing it when you don't have a page. I misspelled that, but that's probably good enough. Yeah, so poetry.foundation.org is a great way to find, poetry. And I thought it was interesting because they've had to make a decision about which one to read first, right? I mean, if you're looking at this on a page, you might say, like, well, if I turn my head this way, then my tender age and sorrow did begin. That seems to be the first line because that's the top one that I see. Or you might think, well, this is the left page, and left comes before right in typical like Western languages. So left, so maybe Lord who created man and wealth and something. Those are, maybe that's the way to read it. But here they went with that. They went with that. This is the left page is the first stanza. So Lord who created man and wealth and store. Though foolishly he lost the same, decaying more and more till he became most poor. With thee, oh let me rise as larks harmoniously, and sing this day thy victories, and shall the fall further the flight. Then shall the fall further the flight in me. Is that right? My tender age and sorrow did begin. And still with sickness and shame, thou didst punish sin that I became most then. With thee let me combine and feel thy victory, for if I imp my wing on thine, affliction shall advance the flight in me. So notice the imagery, like the text is referring to flight and flying and being in flight. And what we see are wings, like we see visually sort of angel wings, probably we could say. So that's one example. Another one, and I by the way, in perusal, I've gone through and I've in some cases annotated them, right? So like you can see the image with it. So if you click on Silentio, here's an image of Silentio. I've also got that on the slide. Here's an image of Apfel. Apfel is a little bit harder to type out for yourself, and so I thought I would show you this one. Apfel by, make sure I get the name right, Dole. Reinhard Dole is, you can see the word apple, like Apfel is German for apple, and then if you look, the shape of it basically follows an apple. It's using probably letterpress, I don't know, but it looks like an image of text that's been kind of sliced into the shape of an apple, as opposed to a typewriter being used to position keys in the right place to type an image in this way. And what you'll see if you look at it, I mean, this is a low resolution image of it anyway, but if you look closely, you'll see that it's mostly apple, but there is one tiny little worm right here in the bottom right. So, or worm, I don't know. I'm not sure the exact pronunciation. I guess Jessica is my German major. She can correct my pronunciation if it's just worm, right? Like V-U-R, like I think that's how it is. Anyway, so that's Apfel, and this is obviously an example where the structure of it conveys the meaning. Like the visual structure in this case conveys the meaning. And what we're looking for are ways that later on other kinds of structure like time and sound and movement can also create meaning. And that's really the main connection. So I got it? Okay, thanks Jessica and James. Thanks for confirming. I mean, it's a pretty simple word, right? I mean, German in general is I find pretty simple to, relatively, pronounceable compared to other languages. Like my tongue fits around it a little bit more readily than other languages. Like French is always a struggle for me. So moving on a bit. So you're probably familiar with E.E. Cummings. I hope you are. E.E. Cummings is a well-known poet, widely anthologized in intro to lit classes, basically. And he does a lot of poetry that has a kind of, energy to it, I guess, but well-known for concrete poetry in the sense that what you look at conveys conveys part of what you take away from it. And this poem here is one that I learned it. I mean, I remember only discovering this or noticing it, I guess, somewhat recently. And it's the kind of poem that, I could read it out to you, but I think the visual appearance of it is a major aspect of it. So maybe make this a little bit bigger. If I do like that, what happens? Let me see what that does on the stream. Oh yeah, that works. That looks pretty good actually. So this is his poem. Well, what is the title for this poem? It is usually titled just L parentheses A, like that L paren A is the title of it. But you can see that there are actually several words here broken out in a couple ways. So we've got an L, the opening parentheses, the letter A, and then L-E-F. So, you kind of stumble over it if you try to explain it, but it seems to be the word loneliness, like L up here, and then down here, onliness, down near, can I point to that? Down near the bottom. And yeah, that looks pretty good, down near the bottom there. But in the middle of it, there's a leaf falls. And I sort of love this poem because of the image it suggests. Like the leaf is falling really literally vertically down the page. Like we can follow it there. I can't quite point unless I sort of drag myself over here. Let me do this. So as you go down the page, you can see the leaf falling, right? You can sort of see your eye kind of making the words out of the letters as you go down the page, and it even has that sort of back and forth swaying rhythm. If you could imagine a leaf falling and then kind of swaying as it flutters towards the ground. And then this is stuck in this moment with loneliness. And I'm really interested in that because it seems like we could think about loneliness as the last leaf to fall, being by itself, or we can think of the kind of loneliness or the kind of at least solitude that would lead you to be in a situation where you're noticing this kind of thing about a tree falling. And I love that juxtaposition for this poem. A very simple poem in that sense, but simple textually, but very evocative visually and structurally. So this is, I think, a good example of concrete poetry. And I think I remember, like, as a like in third grade or whatever, being told to write a poem about a Christmas tree in the shape of a Christmas tree, and like that is a kind of concrete poetry as well. But I think anytime you're paying attention to the material structure of language, the physical structures of language, the visual structures of text and type, I think this is the same thing that we're doing when we talk about concretism or concrete poetry. So here's another example, and this is not mentioned in the chapter, but I think it's relevant, and I also really like it a lot. So it's a poet named Aram Saroyan, and his poetry is concrete-like, or concretist, I suppose, but he's more often described as a minimalist poet, and you'll see why. Here are a couple of his most, I'm going to show you a couple of his most, I guess, well-known but also controversial poems. Controversial because the controversy is that really a poem? So let's take a look. What do you think? Here's a poem. I think I've shown you all this before, or at least I meant to. I like this poem a lot, so I often show it to people. This is it. It's not going to animate or anything. I was just kind of giving you a minute with it. This is a poem that I'm not sure how to pronounce, and that's part of where the poetry starts, I think, because it puts you back into yourself and thinking about how words are put together. So Patrick says, I think I showed it. Okay. I think I showed it. I'm trying to remember why, but I think when I showed it to you before, it had a different colored background for some reason. But this is the original way it would be printed, right, on a sheet of typing paper, Lighghtht, in a typewriter kind of font. This is Cambria. Yeah, something like that. I think it was just kind of an off the cuff kind of thing. But this poem here suggests and displays what it is. Like, light is the word that it starts with, but it's a word that becomes something else by adding two letters, but those two letters are silent in the original, so are they also silent in the version that we see here? If so, then this would just be pronounced light, but if by being doubly present, is their silence now significant, and should we in some ways recognize that through pronunciation and say this like Light or lift or like or something else? The letters together, G and H, in the English language can be pronounced like F, like as in the word laugh. So is this lift or lift, or this is a word that sort of refuses to be pronounced, and I find that fascinating. But also, as a work of concrete poetry, look at all the light. Like, look at all the light around it, especially right now with the white background. It is flashing itself at us and showing us what it is through all of that white. Here's another poem by Aram Saroyan. Really not any way to pronounce that I can think of. So this is, but you can see that it is not several things. It is almost two N's. It is more than an M. It is kind of all of those. Many people often point out that the specific design of the letter here, whether it's an M or two N's or whatever, the size of those big block serifs relative to just the general weight of the font, I guess those would be slab serifs, it kind of mimics the M's that you see on the candy M&M's, and so perhaps this is a reference to that. Oh, why did that just switch? I didn't touch it? Okay. Anyway, so this is another poem, and I actually wrote this one out. This is, well, let me show you the original. The original is, I don't know. I mean, this is one of those things that because it's such a, the idea of it is what it is. Like, what is the actual original? So Eugene Gomringer created this, and it's in Italian originally. Silenzio. Oh, there's actually, I got it wrong, right? It's the word silence surrounding a blank space, basically. And what I love about this is that silence, the gap here, right? The absence of anything in the middle is what makes that absence mean silence. Otherwise, absence just is absence, and the lack of text is just no text there. But in this case, it makes it something else. The fact that you have to pass through these walls of the word silence, which are ironic because they are not silent. They are the word silence speaking its silence. That looks better, yeah. This is now the poem. And it sort of embeds this meaning in that blank space, in the negative space here in the middle. But that meaning is embedded by the ways that the things that we have to go through to get to it, not the thing itself. And I just love this aspect of the poetics here. Yeah, so Silence by Gomringer. All right, so these are some important background pieces, and you'll see as the article goes on, or the chapter goes on, there's a gradual way in which certain artists and poets like Jackson Maclow and B.P. Nickel are associated with these earlier 20th century movements, but then they are also actually doing digital poetry once that becomes available, and so there's kind of a gradual shift throughout this. But one thing I wanted to, I guess, notice, I did not actually go through and look at many of your comments yet in this particular chapter. I just left my own comments, mainly just like links to things like that. But I do want to go through and look at them because I want to make sure you get this. There's a ton of examples in here. Like this chapter is probably the most example rich as far as having things that it references in it. So let's see. We can probably find the. I always have a hard time finding these. The research collections for this chapter. Let's see if I can find it very quickly. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Yeah, that was pretty quick. Great. So this is the research collection for this chapter with more information about the examples, and it's a ton of examples, like I was saying. So I really want you to know these things, right? We'll talk about some more of these on Wednesday and Friday of this week, but you want to look at it, and I'm kind of emphasizing that because while I am in many ways skeptical of what perusal actually tells me about your experience with these things, it is a little suggestive at least. So let me show you one thing. This is what's called the page view report, and it shows that most of the viewing happened in the first half of the chapter, which is fine, understandable, but it goes up to 50 pages. So it looks like, if this is accurate, which it probably isn't, it looks like only 10 people out of 40 of us reading it have actually accessed the last page of this document. So and actually only 2 people read page 40, whatever's on page 40. I don't know, maybe there's nothing important on page 40. So the point is, I want to make sure that you do spend some time with the second half of this. I'm not saying you didn't, because obviously some of you did, and also you may have downloaded it and read it that way, and that would be fine, or read it in paper form, and that's fine too. But I just want to make sure that you pay attention to the last part, because the last part is really kicks off in terms of digital poetry. So cool, yeah, thanks, Connor. Yeah, and I wonder in your case, especially like if you read it and then you went to like a specific page, right? This analytic would not really explain anything about your reading process. Like if it captured your pages, like maybe you read page 42, or maybe you were the one who like cranked up the average on page 23 for whatever reason. That this is a way in which that's a good example of how this sort of analysis of how much a group has read is really pretty it's not very reliable, and I'm not really relying on it. I just want to make sure that you all see that there's a lot in this chapter that happens sort of in the second half. And so make sure you do see that. I guess I can also look at the distribution of comments as another way of thinking about how much you've read, but that's okay. All right, so I wanted to show you all some examples, some more examples of things, and I'm actually I think that's all I have for the slideshow. Like I said, there's not a lot here. But I wanted to show you some examples of, let's go with sound poetry, because that's kind of like, it is kind of like concrete poetry in terms of being about the material and about the presentation, but not necessarily needing computers. And I'm putting in my headphones here so I can make sure to hear it. I'm not sure what is going to be the best way to convey this to you. I have a couple of videos queued up here, and I can either I can show them on YouTube, or I could load them in my media player, or I can try them through OBS. I'm going to try to sit it straight through OBS first and see how that goes. The drawback there is I can't actually get the sound to work for myself on OBS, so it'll be a little bit delayed for me. Like I can hear it on the live stream, but I'm going to try it and see how this goes, but I might need to switch if this doesn't work well. All right, so I'm going to try it with one example that should be pretty easy to see pretty quickly whether it works or not. And let's see, I'm going to start with Karawane. And this is Karawane is a poem by Hugo Ball, who was a Dadaist, and you will remember Dadaism from when we talked about combinatory poetics and Tristan Tzara and his poem How to Make a Dadaist Poem. And so Hugo Ball was an associate of Tristan Tzara, and this is an amusing video clip because it features Marie Osmond, who was the host of this TV show called Ripley's Believe It or Not, which was a book series, and it's an amusement thing at different boardwalk kind of places, like there's one in Pigeon Forge, or no, it's in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It's like a building you go to and you walk around and look at stuff. But they had a TV show too, and so it's kind of like, look at this fascinating thing, these weird things around the world. And so Marie Osmond was kind of a fixture of 1970s television. sort of like, I don't know, the Kelly Ripa of 1970s television. I don't know why I thought of Kelly Ripa, but I'm trying to think of another person who would have been, I don't know, but she was on TV a lot. What show was she on? Her and her brother Donnie were on that show together. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But she's going to be telling us about this poem here, and actually does a pretty good job explaining it. And then she's going to. What's key about this is that she performs this poem as well, Karawane, by Hugo Ball. So I'm gonna hit play and make sure this works.
When you know you're going to be on stage, you want to make sure that you look your best and that you're properly dressed for the part. Appearance was especially important to a gentleman named Hugo Ball. He was a poet and a leader of an artistic movement called Dada. A hat like this was part of his costume, which looked like this. The number 13 on the cardboard tube that covered his face had nothing or everything to do with his performance. Dada artists didn't claim to make sense, but they did want to make unconventional artistic statements, most of them as a form of social protest. In this case, the statement included waving a small flag while reciting a nonsensical poem. The poem was written and first performed by Hugo Ball in Zurich in 1916. And it remains to this day a classic example of what Mr. Ball called sound poetry. Here's what it sounds like. A totally imaginary language invented by Mr. Ball. Kawani jolifanto blumba ofali humbla. Grossiga me pafla habla horami gaga gorman. High globlo ikora sula huju. Holaka holala. An logobang, blagobang baso futaka. Ooh. Shampa uwala wasa. Olobo. Hechtada gorame sej zumbada. Wulubu susuba de uluwa susuba de tamba. Baumf. Kasagama. Baumf. It didn't make any sense, but it wasn't supposed to make any sense. But nevertheless, Mr. Ball's performance got a rousing ovation and turned out not to be a passing fancy, but a new art form, sound poetry.
All right, so that was fun. I think it worked. It looked like you all said it did, so and I was able to see it coming through, so that seems like it worked. I had to mute myself. Yeah, I had to listen to it played back from Twitch so that it was like a 10-second delay, but it seemed to work. Yeah, so pretty cool. And I guess let me just, I'm not going to replay it, but I wanted to point out one or two interesting things about this video of it. If I can, let's see if I can figure out how to move the playhead forward in this. Maybe. Oops. Yeah, I think this works. So moving it ahead, I wanted to, yeah. So you can, it's kind of blurry here, but the actual sound of it, I think, is in many ways influenced by the typography and just choosing of different typefaces to print it in. And these were choices made by Hugo Ball, and I'm looking at it on this computer. I mean, typefaces, you could say, do carry an idea about how something should sound or what it should mean or what kind of value something should have. And I think you could hear Marie Osmond here pronouncing those and saying those things out loud. You can also find, there's also a video of Hugo Ball himself. I mean, it's a film, but it's a Hugo Ball performing this. And actually, I'll just put it in Discord in case you want to look at it later. And this is a bit, you could say, closer to the original. But I actually kind of like Marie Osmond's better. That in the Discord there. So yeah, check it out if you'd like. Okay, so some more examples of sound poetry. So I wanted to take a minute and listen to just a few seconds, probably because of time, a bit by Jackson Maclow, who's another sound poet and avant-garde poet. And this is going to be a little bit of him reading his own poetry and performing it. Here he is.
I'm going to now read a series of poems
I'm just going to
called
skip around
Phone.
this a little bit.
It to see you can I come over right now? Yes, yeah. Can I come right now? Yes, yeah. Yes, so I hate hello, hello, no, I'm not And worse, to hear I'll hone its if it was hello, I come over, Were the phone, it's never yo. If it was you, ever be you saying it's me, I love yo so much. Hardly wait, I come over, right? I hate the sound of the phone. I can hardly wait to see. Wait to see. So much I can hardly wait to see. Well, yes, yeah, I hate the sound. Oh, it was you. And ever I answer it was you. Yes. Hello, hello.
Yeah, sorry about that. Here I am. It's a lot of things I'm managing here, and there's like a lot of hammering in the background. So here's the video that I just shared, in case you want to watch the whole thing. As I was saying, all I said while I was muted is that he was he describes the beginning in a little bit. He describes how this is a kind of a deconstruction of a telephone conversation, and you can hear him talking about phones and the message. He also did interesting visual typographic work. He did Oulipian kind of deterministic transformations of text, and it's pretty interesting. And he's a really fascinating. He was a fascinating poet, and definitely working in the avant-garde, and definitely inspiring a lot of what we kind of take that we're interested in about contemporary computing, digital poetry. All right, so one more visual example here, and this one I'm not going to show you the whole thing. And this is very intense visually, flash-wise, like visually flashing and blinking. So if that's an issue for you, then please turn away as I show you this one. This is going to be a bit of Lin Lai. Lin Lai is the director's name or filmmaker's name, and it's a very energetic work. It to me looks like music videos from the mid 90s. A lot of them look like this, but this is from 1926, I think, or 1930s anyway. We'll see. So this is Lin Lai. This is yeah. Well, we'll see. Okay, I'm back. I just wanted to point out, I mean, I skipped ahead a little bit so you can see the actual text part where it says the rhythm of trade is maintained by the males. That's the text of it, but obviously, as you can see from this, the content of this is much more than the text of it. It's not just those lines; it's the whole visual presentation of it. And he was using analog techniques to create this, even though it has a kind of edgy kind of digital look to it. It is similar to, in some ways, similar to contemporaries like Oscar Fischinger, who are also working with abstract animation, but Lin Lai has a sort of a grungier look to his work, and is also like using text in here. So I think it makes sense to think of this as a kind of precursor to kinetic digital poetry like we think of now. Okay, so one final example that I think I can show you pretty quickly, or I hope I can. This is, if I can find the right tab, this is, this will take a second to kind of pull back up here, but this is a Apple II emulator that I'm going to try to use to emulate First Screening by BP Nickel, and it's a Apple II disc, so it was I think a 5 1/4 floppy initially, so a big floppy disk. I don't believe this has sound, so I think I'm going to be able to talk over it as it goes through it. And I'm running this in an emulator. There is also a HyperCard version, which you can find and emulate yourself. This one doesn't take much to run, but it's here's the information if you want to try it yourself. It just takes a little bit of a couple of steps. You don't have to download a fancy emulator or anything. It just runs. This one runs in the browser. You can download a fancy emulator if you want, but there's really not much to it. And this is going to be some kinetic poetry here, and I think with just the first, I don't know how long this is total, I think maybe like 12 minutes, but we'll just kind of take a look at the first few here. First Screening computer poems, and this was programmed in BASIC, and so it's a fairly, time-intensive programming to do this kind of bit by bit. Here it is loading some of the data about it. Island. There it is. These move kind of fast, but you can kind of see with the waves how it would have looked like rippling waves, and with the island, the rock in the middle. Self-reflexive number 1. Dream you lost, toss all night. 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 BP Nickel also did quite a bit of sound poetry, so I think the sound of these things is very important, especially that one, where if you say it very often, if you say it as many times as it goes by there, you're going to lose track of it. Set down to write you this poem. Down to write you this poem, sat. To write you this poem, set down. Write you this poem, set down to. You, this poem, set down to write. This poem, set down to write you. Poem, set down to write you this. Reverie. $35. Sun. Ho. This one goes a little slower, so I can actually explain it a little bit more. I'm actually not sure if the symbols at the bottom are intentional or not, and that's kind of the fun thing with avant-garde poetry is that you might see that as an error, or you might try to pronounce it and see if that makes sense. And I think both could be valid, but you can see different versions of this poem and perhaps get a sense of which was intended or not. It could be, I think this is actually something going on with the character encoding. I think that's actually not supposed to be what that looks like. You can take a look at it in the JavaScript version, and this is one way to just play it, and you can kind of see what it does or doesn't do in this JavaScript version on this web page. I'm not going to have time to show it to you now, but that particular poem looks a little different in the JavaScript version, so that might be closer to how it was intended. Okay, so this is BP Nickel's work. I really I like it a lot, but I can show you. I shared the link just now to the Vizpo page for how you can play it. Vizpo.com is Jim Andrews' website, and so he's done a lot of archival work, not just as he is a digital poet. You might remember his stir-fry text and spaz text from earlier, but he also does this work in archiving and preserving work like BP Nickel's. So that's why that's available there now. And there's a web page about that where you can access the JavaScript version. And there's also a HyperCard version, which I linked to. Whoa, sorry, it's playing sound in my ears. Yikes. The HyperCard version I linked to in Perusal. And I can't figure out what made that sound. So I don't know if you all heard that too, but that was really loud. That kind of hurt my ears. So I'm going to close this tab. It might have been that one. Anyway, we're out of time, so I need to wrap up anyway. Stay tuned for instructions for Wednesday. There is something that I would like for us to read together, and I need to figure out if it's going to work on Wednesday or maybe it might work better Friday. But mainly, just make sure you've got the examples down, figured out in Chapter 5. Of course, finish your third gen project. If you have questions about that, let me know. And also get your proposal for the final project ready, and that's due Friday. The proposal doesn't have to be a big deal, but I want to know what direction you're headed in, especially if you're headed towards Wikipedia, so I can help you figure out how to do that and coordinate that work as much as possible. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Hopefully that's hopefully you enjoyed that today. Oh, it just says my bird cam's not working. Why is my bird feeder cam not on? That's odd. I'll see if I can figure that out. Oh yeah, it's just not even there. Okay, well you didn't miss anything. There's no birds, but I'll try to figure that out and get that working right now. But otherwise, thanks for watching the stream, everyone. I'll see you in class on Wednesday if you are in the even cohort, and everyone else I'll see on Zoom using the normal link. Okay, so see you later. I will turn on some ambient music while I try to figure out my webcam thing here. Yeah, bye everyone.